Welcome to today's Fire Up training, everyone. Before we get started, just a few important notes. If you haven't already made sure to check out our website, this is where you can find recordings of past Fire Up trainings, product information, and other helpful resources anytime, day or night. Since today's session is being recorded, please go ahead and turn off your cameras and keep your mics muted during the presentation. We'll have a Q&A at the end, so feel free to drop your questions in the chat or just hang out until that time. Now, let's go ahead and get to the reason why you're here this morning. We are excited to have our is it Southeastern? I can't remember. Jared Gruel, our BDM Newfields Ag Jared Gruel with us today, and he brought a speaker with him. So let's all welcome Dr. Connor Sible. They will be talking to us about classifying biologicals today. So with that said, I'll pass it over to you, Jared. And let's make sure your mic is off or is on.
Well, gosh, I'm so used to turning it off for all of these. So, yes, everyone, I'm the Southern Region Business Development Manager based out of Mattoon, Illinois. And when I was asked about different presentation topics, this is one I immediately thought of. I started with Newfields Ag back in September of 23, and one of the constant questions I've been asked is, how do we sort through all these different biological inputs, because it's a very quickly growing industry. It seems like there's always someone new coming out with something. And so one of the persons who I thought to ask to kind of help walk through this is Dr. Sible from the University of Illinois. And to prime it up, I described it to him as, even though there is no true classification system, if Dr. Sible was given the task to create the worldwide family groups of biologicals, how would he do it? That's what I asked him to talk about. And since he's the star of the show today, I'm going to turn it over to him. So Dr. Sible, would you care to take over from here?
Okay, well, thank you so much. Just a quick tech check. The screen coming through okay?
You are good, sir.
Awesome. So happy to be here, especially on a morning where things are kind of melting and slushy and everything. So hopefully we'll have some good discussion, things to learn about in this biological space. And I'm also very happy that it's more about the classification, just what are these products in general, because there's so many out there, as Jared so rightfully said, and depending on your region and what's sourced locally, the products will change region to region. So I could stand here today and go through trial A, we tested this product and this is what we saw. And trial B, it was this product and what we saw. But the reality is I have different acres than some of you may have, and likely I'm looking at maybe different products just because of it. So rather than try and say which products don't work or and what scenarios, we're going to just kind of walk through what they are in general. You can see a sneak peek. I've got this photo on the back of the screen. I use that as a field demo. It's a very broad area of inputs, and we'll walk through those so you can understand, hey, this biological does that. I don't need another one of those. Maybe I need a biological that fits a different category. And so that's why I title it Bio What? Stimulants, logicals, fertilizers. It really does depend on who and what you're talking with. But why are there so many different products coming out lately? And I like analogies, nothing like a good C.W. McCall reference. But I would say in 2015, this market had a little old convoy, because they've been around, right? They're not just emerging out of the woodwork in the last decade out of nowhere. Anyone use a soybean inoculant? It's like the original biological. Now, it's one of those products that we've heard about for so long and we're so familiar with that I don't think many of us put Bradyrhizobium and soybean inoculants in the biological bucket, but they are. It kind of was the original one, like I mentioned. And then humic and fulvic acids, amino products, or kelp extracts, they've been around here and there, but maybe not mainstream. So I would say 2015, we had a little old biological convoy. 2019 was then the great big convoy. What was significant about 2019? That was the year Pivot Bio launched Proven. Nitrogen fixation in corn, right? That's just got a lot of head scratching, and it really got the buzz around biologicals start to steamroll. I would say then by 21, it was a great big or mighty convoy. And in 23, as this area crashed the gate to 98, let those products roll. And why I use that year as a reference is many of you have probably seen this diagram, the 2023 Ag Biologicals landscape. Now, what's interesting about this is, like I said, it's 2 years old, and many of you are trying to zoom into your screens and figure out what's on there. Don't worry, it is hard to read and blurry, and it's too small. The key point here is every blur on there is a logo, and that's a logo of a company that was identified to have been in the ag biologicals landscape as of 2023. And there's different bins in here, and you can see, thinking like the reference to herbicide actives. Is it a group 1, 2, 3, or whatever we're thinking? But now it's these categorical groupings that we have. So why this big shift? Why are we talking about biologicals so much? What's driving that convoy is this shift to biology over chemistry-based systems, right? And if I say something like regenerative agriculture or soil health, that intuitively rings this biology-based system. But that's thinking practices, things that you change on your acre to get towards those systems. The other thing we have to remember is who's our consumer, who's purchasing our commodities. Whether it's going for feed, fuel, or fiber, those purchasing it want to say, the product we made with this grain was grown in a more biological friendly way. So it's also consumer demand. So whether you're interested in changing or not, it's this shift we see across the board, from producers actively doing that all the way to consumers wanting products in this way. And when you have something that's driving that shift, it keeps the momentum going. And now we have this booming biologicals market space that we've been looking at largely the last decade. It's really surged. But as we work through these products, some of the terminology becomes a challenge, because the other word we've often heard is biostimulants. That's kind of an older term for those that have been working with these maybe since the beginning. But then in the last 5 years, I really only ever hear this biologicals term. And it did get us thinking a little bit, what is the right term, especially for those that are retail and sales teams? When you're talking about a product, you want your sales force to be talking about them consistently, right? Always using the similar terminology, because then it shows you understand your products and you work through them together and train your teams as such. Biologicals is an interesting term. It's actually not federally defined, or even most state level not defined. It's actually a word that's kind of been adopted by the industry side. If you're familiar with APCO, BPIA, that's the Biological Products Industry Alliance, or the Fertilizer Institute, Biostimulant Coalition. These are organizations that have industry members, and they sit between industry and Congress. Try and make sure that when laws are written, it doesn't come too aggressively to prevent us doing what we need to do in the fields. And if you go to their websites, they usually say biologicals are a grouping of biostimulants, biopesticides, and biofertilizers. And if you go back to this diagram, sure enough, there are the big three groups. You got your biopesticides in the top right, your biostimulants in the bottom left, your biofertilizers in the bottom right. For my interest moving forward, we're not going to talk about biopesticides. It's in the name, pesticides. Pesticides are federally regulated, and there is very strict guidelines on how you get those labeled. It's the bottom two categories, the stimulants and the fertilizers, that aren't federally regulated, and therefore why they're growing the most rapidly. Biostimulants does have some federal working descriptions, and biofertilizers is kind of a subclass from that, and we'll talk about why, but what is the current proposed definition of biostimulants? So the 2018 Farm Bill was the first time this word actually showed up in U.S. legislation. And so we know that pesticides like herbicides, fungicides, insecticides, those are federally regulated, and there's terminology. If you really want to read through FIFRA, you can go through it, that defines how that process works. We don't have that for biostimulants yet, but they're working on it. And so in that Farm Bill, they gave a proposed definition that we're going to have substances or microorganisms that you can apply to the seeds, the plants, or the rhizosphere, that this is the key: enhance or benefit nutrient uptake, nutrient use efficiency, or tolerance to stress. Two things ring out with this description that you need to be aware of. One, not highlighted in orange, what is not on here is bigger roots, bigger shoots as a direct effect. If you directly make a bigger root or bigger shoot, that's a PGR, plant growth regulator. That's why you don't have a new PGR coming to your door every day. Those are federally regulated through FIFRA. So this is products that are nutrient or stress mitigating specific. Now, By default, if you improve those, you might get bigger roots and shoots, but it's not direct effect. So that's key point number one. We are not talking about PGRs when we talk about biostimulants. And then key point number two is that substance or microorganism. And now we're starting to break it out and categorize as you think about these products. And what I have here is, as Jared said, what would I put as my categorical approach to this? And I say biostimulants because that's the legal phrase today. These are what I would say are the 8 most common types of products you're likely to come across. 85% of the market probably fits these categories. There's some others that are unique out there. Not to say I've got them all here because it is so broad, but their top 4 would be microbial-based products, and my bottom 4 are substances. So that's starting to break it out a little bit. And we'll walk through these to end that webinar about what they really do for your system and how you maybe say, I have a product that fits one category, I need something in another. So that was the 2018 Farm Bill. As anything in the government, takes time, still hasn't been finalized. So 2023, they tried to amend the FIFRA to get that biostimulant terminology in place. And the latest was this last May. They did a second attempt. They're updating it, rephrasing it. So here's the latest description. Now it's still a substance or an organism. Oh, now you can mix them. That's the biggest change moving forward. And the terminology and the phrasing changed, but look at the key points, right? It's still nutrient availability, uptake, or efficiency. It's still stress. By default, if you get 1 or 2, you can get consequently better growth, development, and yield. Again, it's not, if consequently you get growth, development, that's number 1, that's PGR. So this is the current working description that they're trying to get approved. Why I think this is so important is when this is finalized, it will change the labeling process. I don't know if current on-market products will be grandfathered in or if all the products out there will have to be relabeled officially through the now defined thing. So we'll just keep an eye on it. But as somebody that sells, markets, and retails these, it's important to keep up with how the labeling process is and how they're described, right? Do you have a biostimulant and how do you go about describing that? So very important there. It did get longer. You'll notice there's more words on my screen. So right when I figure, all right, 2018 we started, 23, that biologicals landscape was a little overwhelming. Maybe we finally simplified it in 25. And then this comes out. And now it's the 2025 biostimulant landscape. They changed the title, right? All these different subgroups of types of products. And so it's gotten a little more complicated, but if you do focus in, you can see there's the substances, the microbials, or the mixed portfolios. So it does track at least with what the current descriptions and definitions are working on, but we now have more subcategories. And another thing that's important to note, this diagram, if you look at the old diagram, would fit inside the bottom left corner. So this would fit inside the bottom left corner, meaning we still have that biofertilizer, well, maybe they mix together, and then the biopesticides above. So it is a very complicated market, and I wish we had all the solutions today, but the good news, maybe we're improving a little bit. But this was me. So prior to understanding bioproducts, happy. This is right when I started grad school, it was 9 years ago. And then this is me afterwards, right? Is that hair loss because I'm a little older or because I've been trying to figure this thing out? But one of the things that kind of comes to mind, I've been using this biostimulant term, and that's because as an academic, I have to be as accurate and specific as possible when I write papers and talk about different areas. So if I do so, the government term, the regulatory term is biostimulant. That's key there. And if you are really glutton for punishment and you want to dive into academic literature, these are all the different reviews in the last few years that have said about this product area, biostimulants, right? And it's also a good point. These are a lot of references for how I categorize things, but they all use biostimulants. So then it's, back to kind of how the webinar was introduced and the topic of discussion. Where does this biological terminology really come from other than it's a larger class to say biostimulants, biofertilizers, and biopesticides? Anyone ever open an ag media magazine, scroll on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, whatever's your fix these days, right? Look at all the titles of these ag media articles. What do you see? Biologicals. You don't see that biostimulant term. I haven't heard that term really used industry-wise in quite a few years, at least at scale. not just in the media, right? So Syngenta bought Valagro, was the #1 biostimulant producer in the world, now rebranded as Syngenta Biologicals. Corteva acquired Stoller and rebranded, rebadged Corteva Biologicals. So when we think about what's the right terminology, it technically would be biostimulants, but that's only for us on the regulatory and academic side, which is a very small group. The rest of the world that we work with on acres in the field is really using biologicals. But I will say this, when I talk to folks and I say, biological, usually the first thing to come to mind is a living microbial, bacillus or AMF type product. Most people don't think humic acid or amino acid immediately when I say biological. But if I say biostimulant, that seems to come to mind. So in the real world, this is what I see. And this is what I think farmers better resonate with if we use the terminology as such. Biologicals is this living, biostimulants is the non-living. That is the mindset that I am going to use moving forward when I refer to these products, when I talk on extension and to farmers. I think this really boils it down and simplifies it way more than the last 10 minutes of what I showed you. But that's the process of the terminology. And we're in the crop physiology program in Champaign. So we've been doing some biological trials last 11 years, corn and soy. And I'll focus, you can really see in the last 5 years, we've been doing a lot of these studies. Some of them are multi-year, multi-site. Some of them are kind of one-off, one product in 1 year. But with this, we've learned a lot about these types of products. And that's, I think, the most important things as we go through the next 10 minutes here to focus in on the big takeaways, the bigger picture, if you're going to try such a product. When we think about inputs to ag systems, right, it starts with the seed. You're having those discussions now. If you haven't had them already, you have to get the right seed on the right acre. And not even within just right seed per field, right? It's per acre these days with a lot of what we can do. Seed's expensive. We need a good nutrient management plan. I'm a yield scientist. I'm all about, can we maximize yield, sustainability, and profitability are of course key there. But if you want to push yields, it comes down to base nutrition. That's where yield starts. Anything we do after nutrition is making sure we capitalize on what we set the stage for. So seed's expensive, right seed, right acre. Fertility management, get it off to the potential. I don't like pests. These take yield away, right? We have to have a good pest management strategy in place. I'll pick on soybeans a little bit, right? But driving down the road, whether it's the highway, the interstate, the old country road that's only 1.5 lanes wide, it doesn't matter. It's hard to find a perfectly clean bean field these days, right? And that's just taking yield away in spots. So we have to have the basics covered. Then we start talking specialty products. That's probably the biggest thing I want you to take away today. I'll give you a good example. If you have a pH problem, no biological biostimulant is going to fix your pH, right? And then no additives after these bases are going to help push yields if pH is the limiting factor. So then we can make it go full circle on biologicals. So before we really get into the category specifics, you have to have the basics covered because what we see is biologicals or biostimulants. It's a next step input, not necessarily a replacement today. That's today's products, right? And a lot of that, look at the weather, right? There can be a lot of shifts in there, and we want to make sure our crops are better, ready to go. The second question then we have to sort of ask ourselves is, what are we using? And I've got those beneficial microbes or biologicals as we refer to, and the substances, or as I like to say, it's the biostimulants, and that's the living and the dead. But this is very important. Right? So I have 2 dogs, and I agreed I was going to feed the dogs, give them shelter, keep them alive. Apparently, it's the same, my sister says, for my nephews and kids, right? But you have a commitment. And so if you're working with a living product, are you committed to keeping it alive when it shows up at the shop door in February? Is your warehouse location understanding that, hey, the living product should be maybe in the center of the warehouse, not on the walls that might be changing in temperature more rapidly? Things to think about when we go there. So the second recommendation is you really need to know if your product's alive or dead. And that's not just at the farm level, that's at the retail level, at the warehouse distributor. I mean, it's a lot of training involved because some require commitment. Out of curiosity, when we focus in, I would say that the microbial side is the area that's growing the most rapidly. And out of curiosity, I surveyed 155 products that were labeled for corn, soy, or wheat, looked at the active ingredients. How many active ingredients did I find on 155 products? All right, it was more than one. I'll show you the list. Very blurry, right? Another blurry thing that Connor put on the slides that you can't read. The key point is every little blur there is an active ingredient I found. 139 unique microbial species surveyed from 155 products. And then Jared said, can I go ahead and categorize these into some sort of simplified system, right? There's a lot to go through. The good news is a lot of these are one-off. Here's the top 10. So if you're curious, of those 155 products, here's the top 10 active ingredients I came across. Again, I did not ignore soybean inoculum, right? 1/5 of my products were Brady rhizobium. Key important to remind yourselves. And then we have these bacillus really running out the top 5 here, the 5 in addition to that Brady rhizobium. So your top 6 is bacillus or Brady, and then azospirillum, azotobacter, and trichoderma. These are the most common. The nice thing about this is if you get a product that's one of these, there's a good chance it's a legitimate type of product, an active one that the industry trusts. Then you have to ask yourselves, how are they carrying it? How are they distributing it, making sure it stays alive? That's where most companies are going to separate out, is their carrier or their delivery system and their shelf life. The actives themselves are pretty well established, right? So this gives you confidence that a product might be a legitimate one if it's one of these guys. If it's something you've never heard of, it's one of two things. Not going to work in your area because it's not designed for that, or the next best thing, right? So it could be one of both ways. So with anything, try, but go slow. So back to the categorization. I think this is to capstone really what you were after today. Your products are going to fit in one of these 8 categories, the top being the living and the bottom being the dead. N-fixing bacteria, pretty straightforward. They're going to increase nitrogen availability, pulling it out of the atmosphere and making it plant available. Just like we think of Brady rhizobium and soybean and nodules, it's the concept for corn. And here's some example products out there, right? And they're doing this process and it quickly converts to ammonia, goes to ammonium and plant uptake. And I focus this one in the root zone because if you're using Pivot Bio's Proven or Terramax, which is an azospirillum, on this one. And then the Proven is 2 different microbes that are a little unique. They're root-based. But if you're using Invita or Utrisha, for the most part, those are foliar-based, right? Some of the Invita can go root-applied or in furrow, depending on new formulations coming out with. But these are foliar-based, right? So that might be in the leaves. And I've got a very optimistic corn plant I know here with the 2 ears towards the top. I need to change that one. But they're all N-fixers. Great. They all work very differently, right? Pivot has edited the microbe to always fix nitrogen as long as there's root exudates. And then they're along the roots. The Terramax product is a non-edited, so it's fixing nitrogen as needed, but also in the roots. These 2 are then going to colonize the Invita and the Utrisha inside the leaves between the plant cells. And they fix nitrogen inside the plant. And some people say, is there really that much nitrogen in the plant? Well, plants are pretty good at photosynthesis, right? Carbon dioxide and oxygen go in and out every single day. And so there is nitrogen, and there's a gas that diffuses into the soil as well. But the key point here is these are all N-fixers, but they're not all the same product. You really need to know what you're working with beyond just the category. How does your N-fixer work? Where does it fix the nitrogen? Is it the roots or the leaves? How does it get the nitrogen to the plant? These are questions to ask. Just like any old herbicide, right? We can think about different herbicide groups, but within groups, you have different product selections. It's the same thing for biologicals. So don't make the mistake of, oh, it's another N-fixer. I can try it the same way I did the other one. You really need to understand that product. And as you're trying to figure out what products to work with or not, because there are so many of them, these are questions to then ask, right? Who really knows how their product works? Probably worth trying. If they can't tell you how it works or how it gets the nitrogen to the plant, maybe that's something we're not going to try necessarily until they really better understand it, right? So just a way to sort through the products. But this has to be the other one. Not just an N-fixer, but how does that one work compared to the rest? Phosphorus solubilizing microbes, right? They increase availability of mineral phosphorus. Phosphorus in our soils is tied to cations, and that's positive charge with the negative phosphate. Binds it up, whether that's soil applied or that's how our fertilizer gets tied up, right? We put phosphates out and it gets tied up. They release organic acids. They are negatively charged. They can chelate the cation away from the phosphorus. Now it's available. So that's how those work. Is it a phosphorus-based product? We're actually putting these with fertilizer and seeing better success than trying to replace fertilizer with them. If you chelate the cation before the cation chelates your fertilizer stays available. We think that's actually the better strategy right now today. Rather than trying to release soil-bound P, can we just use it as like a bodyguard to fertilizer? But that's what they do, increase mineral phosphorus. Mycorrhizal fungi, they associate with the roots. They grow, they expand into that soil system. Because of that, they extend the roots. That's better nutrient and water acquisition. So is that the type of product? Residue degradation is probably the category that's growing the most rapidly today. N-fixers had a big burst 2019 to 21. Now it's the age of residue degraders. We think about cover crops or no-till, right? So bacteria and fungi in our soils break down residue all the time. The problem is they're in the soil. If we're doing no-till or cover crop, where's the residue? On top of the soil. And eventually rain splash and the plant are running through, gets the microbes in contact, but it's a slow start. The idea of spraying a living microbial blend on the residues is just getting the microbes to the work site much faster than they would naturally. That's the concept there. Whether you're no-till, cover crop, double crop for those in the south, but also higher yields. Higher yields also get more yield residue, right? 1 bushel of corn is about 44 pounds of residue. So we're seeing big increases there. And I think we're getting about our 5-minute mark here. So, yep, perfect. Well, in the next few, we'll go through pretty quick because I think the top 4, especially the residue degradation, the phosphorus, they're growing the most rapidly. Most of your products are going to fit into those categories. How do microbes break down residue? They secrete enzymes, and that would then, we saw a big burst of products in the phosphatase area. That's like skipping the middleman, right? The microbe creates the enzyme. Why not just apply the enzyme direct? So make sure you understand that. The key thing here is maybe the microbes in the soil break them down, and it's like a one-time use. Humic and fulvic acids, so many different options out there, right? Are you dry coating urea? Are you putting it in furrow? Or are you bulk applying hundreds of pounds to the acre? By and large, they chelate cations, they can feed microbes, they can do a bunch of stuff to the soil, water holding capacity. Look at the active ingredients though. Leonardite is a very common one, or some of your biochar type products might fit this category as well. Our kelp and algae, right? That's mostly our foliar stress mitigators. Protein hydrolysates. So you have to look at the jug and is it amino acids or the actives on there? That's mostly our stress mitigators, and then sugars, right? We're really liking soil applied sugar. We've tried foliar, it's hit or miss. We call that the Goldilocks principle. How much sugar do you need at the right time and the right day? It can be hard to target, but when a product comes to you, it should fit one of these 8 categories based on what it does, because there's so many microbes that can do similar things. So that's really what you need to ask. What does that product do? And do you need what that product does? Or do you already have something that's doing that job? So rather than classify by active ingredients, the biostimulants are actually and federally, internationally classified by what they do, not what they are. And that's why the approach I go with here, because that's how they're going to be labeled, by what they do, not what they are. So in summary, it's a rapidly expanding market. They're a next step input, right? They're not going to fix major challenges. How does it fit into your existing system? Don't let them replace the good stuff. And then if you are using a microbe, really know what it does and what category does it belong to. So that's what I've got. I think we've got a few time for some questions here. But yeah.
Awesome.
Very good. So Connor, you hit on exactly, Dr. Sible Connor, you hit exactly on what I was hoping to get hit on here. So how we would go about talking this. So I would say at this point, if we want to open up the floor to questions, if you feel you've adequately covered what you want to cover, Dr. Sible, that's what I would like to do.
All right.
Let's go for questions. Yeah.
I'm going to hop in here and I'm going to thank you again so much, Dr. Sible, for that wonderful presentation. We are going to move in, like you said, to the Q&A section for the next 10-15 minutes. We're going to discontinue the recording at this time and encourage you to take this time to ask the experts your questions. So we'll answer the questions in the chat that may have come through during the training. And if you held on to any questions, please raise your hand or unmute yourself to ask your question. If you think of a question at a later time, please reach out to your local Newfields Ag reseller or business development manager or contact the office here. All contact information can be found on the newfieldsag.com website. If you are jumping off now, we hope you had a blessed day and thank you so much, very much for joining us.